Story 1. The Ash Crown of Kalmara. Those who wore the ash never returned. Those who refused it begged for the crown before dawn. Iravan's hands still remembered the prince's pulse. That was the worst part. Not the king's screaming. Not the stones thrown during the banishment march. Not the 6 weeks of walking south into a desert that had no pity. The worst part was his own fingers. They remembered the boy's heartbeat slowing beneath them, slowing, weakening, vanishing, as if death had pressed itself into his skin and refused to leave. The red dunes of Viren Kuth gave him nothing. No water. No shelter. No forgiveness. Irevan walked because stopping meant looking at his hands, and his hands remembered dying. Near dusk on the 43rd day, he found the archway. It leaned from the side of a dune like a buried jawbone. Its carvings had been scraped smooth by wind, yet its shadow fell the wrong way, not behind it, but toward the sun, long and black, as though the archway cast its own darkness. Irevan stepped beneath it because the shade was cool. The stairs descended into black stone. Each step carried a name painted in faded red. He counted them the way he once counted pulses. 1, 2, 30, 70. The deeper he went, the darker the red became. On the lowest steps, the names looked wet. At the bottom, Kalmara opened before him. It was not a ruin. It was a patient. The city lay beneath the earth in a state of careful, impossible preservation. Walls cracked but did not fall. Roofs sagged but did not collapse. Doors stood open, not broken, as if everyone inside had stepped out for a moment and never returned. Pots waited on ledges. Grain lay in bowls. Lamps hung from hooks without oil, yet their wicks were black with recent burning. A thin grey ash covered everything. Irevan dragged one finger across a wall. The ash parted, revealing carvings beneath. Names. Not prayers. Not warnings. Names. Hundreds of them, cut into the walls, the floors, the door frames, even the underside of stone benches where no living person would think to look. He walked deeper. His footprints filled behind him, ash sliding silently into each impression until the street was smooth again. Kalmara did not want to remember he had passed. At the city's center stood a temple with 2 faceless guardians beside the entrance. Their features had not been broken away. They had been rubbed away by touch. Thousands of hands. Generations of desperation. A devotion made from erasure. Inside, the ash was thicker. It lay in the corners like old snow. It drifted across the floor despite the absence of wind. It gathered around Iravan's sandals as though curious about warmth. On the altar sat a crown. A circlet of compressed grey ash, darker than the powder around it. No metal held it. No thread bound it. It remained a crown because something in it had decided shape was obedience. It was warm. Irevan did not touch it. Not then. A physician observes before he treats. A physician measures before he cuts. A physician does not place unknown things against the skin. He crouched beside the altar and lifted a pinch of ash from the floor. It felt soft. Then it flexed. He froze. Between his fingers, the grey powder gathered into the faint shape of a fingertip, then a knuckle, then the suggestion of a hand. He dropped it. The ash struck the floor and held the shape of his palm for 3 slow breaths before dissolving back into dust. That night, Irevan slept with his back against a temple pillar and his medicine bag clutched to his chest. He woke before dawn to voices. Not whispers. Not speech. Names. They poured from the walls, from the floor, from the altar, from the ash gathered around his feet. Hundreds. Thousands. Spoken over one another in a dry rush, like sand sliding through the throat of the world. He covered his ears. The names continued inside his skull. In the morning, He reached for the fever herb in his medicine bag and stopped. He knew the herb. He knew its smell, its leaf, its use. He knew how to boil it, how much to give a child, how long before the sweating began. But he did not know its name. The word was gone. Not forgotten. Removed. By the second night, 3 more things were missing: the method for binding broken ribs, the dosage for pain relief in children, and the color of the dead prince's eyes. That last absence hollowed him. He sat before the crown until the temple darkened. The boy's face had already begun to blur. If the eyes went too, then the prince would die a second time, not in flesh, but in memory. And if Irevan could not remember him, what remained of guilt? What remained of penance? What remained of love? He crossed the temple. The crown pulsed heat against his palms before he touched it. When he lifted it, the weight nearly broke his wrists. Not physical weight. Memory weight. The burden of names pressed through his bones. They rushed into him, filling the gaps where his own knowledge had been. Not replacing his memories with comfort, but crowding them, strangers forcing themselves into the rooms of his mind. He heard a woman laughing over a river he had never seen. A child calling for a father he had never been. A soldier whispering apologies into mud. Then one name slid close to the surface. Irevan. He dropped the crown. It did not roll. It sat on the altar as if it had never moved. Behind the altar, a door appeared. He was certain it had not been there before. The wood was blackened and warm. A single name was carved into it, scratched out so violently the grooves had splintered. Irevan opened it. The room beyond was not a room. It was a throat. The walls were ridged, wet, and pulsing. Dark fluid moved through channels in the stone like blood through veins. The floor was not visible. Ash filled the chamber to the waist, and inside it lay bodies. Dozens. Hundreds. They were not rotten. They were not sleeping. They had peaceful faces, folded hands, grey skin, and mouths packed full of ash. Each wore a crown. One space near the door was empty. Ash had gathered there in the outline of a body. The whisper came from inside that empty shape. Irevan. He slammed the door and ran. Up the black stairs. Through the archway. Into the red dunes. He ran until his legs failed and the sun rose like a blade over the sand. For 3 days he walked north. On the first morning, Ash coated the inside of his water skin. On the second, his fingerprints had faded. On the third, he coughed and grey powder spilled from his mouth. It did not scatter in the wind. It crawled back toward his lips. He reached Suyanagara weeks later, though by then he no longer remembered why the city hurt to look at. He stood before its palace gate, thin and grey, his palms smooth as river stones. The guards asked his name. Irevan, he said. The word sounded borrowed. They let him pass because none of them recognized him. Inside the palace, in a forgotten storage room, a servant shook dust from an old physician's cloak. The dust was grey, fine, and warm. From the folds fell a thin circlet of compressed ash. It struck the stone floor with the sound of a heartbeat. Irevan turned toward the sound. For one brief moment, he remembered the prince's eyes. Then the crown remembered them better. He does not remember the boy, the kingdom, or the crime, but the ash does, and it is patient enough to forget him again.